Everyone loves a good mystery, accompanied by the fact that my previous Iceberg video did quite well. Please check that one out. I feel like I should do another one on the analysis of unsolved crime and mystery Iceberg. So first and foremost, this will be a series of video where I will be covering the different layers of the iceberg, as it is certainly too long to fit into a single video. I'll be doing a semi-deep dive on each topic, giving the general background of the case and my thoughts on the particular matter. This video is the first part of the series of 7, where I'll be looking at the first layer of this particular chart. So enough talk, and let's get straight into the unsolved crime and mystery iceberg. Jack the Ripper murders. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who was active in London during the years 1888 to 1891. The Ripper portion of his name was not just meant to shock and awe, as his victims would often be found cut open and mutilated. He targeted female prostitutes who frequent the East End of London. There are 5 confirmed deaths in total, many of which would have their throats sliced and intestines torn apart. The actual number of victims may be much higher. Due to how the bodies were disposed, it was determined that the man had some sort of medical background and was likely mentally ill. An investigation later ensued, where Melville McNaughton, a policeman involved in the investigation at the time, believed that Jack the Ripper was no other than Aaron Kosminski. Aaron was a man living in London at the time who suffered from mental illness. Neville stated that Aaron had a strong hatred towards the female gender and the prostitute class, portraying homicidal tendencies. Aaron was officially diagnosed with insanity on February 7th, 1891. He was sent to a mental asylum, matching when the murder stopped, where he would live out the rest of his life, dying in 1919. Thomas Catbush was another suspect, as he was caught stabbing 2 women's buttocks in 2 separate occasions on public roads. His hatred for women could have arose in 1888, where it was said that he caught syphilis from prostitutes, which led him to commit the future murders. In my opinion, this is a case that will never get solved. Over 100 years have since passed, and the witnesses that could have helped have all since died. DNA evidence cannot cement the true identity of the killer. Unfortunately, this will be a crime where there will be no justice for those who died. The Zodiac Killer. I've done a video covering the topic of the Zodiac Killer. What the case essentially revolves around is an unidentified man who murdered various victims from 1968 to 1974. He would often find couples who were at their dates in a secluded area and would proceed to shoot and kill them. He was given the name Zodiac Killer after naming himself such in the letters that were sent to newspaper stations, often after each killing. In these letters, he would taunt the media of how he was not caught and would include ciphers, which if cracked was said to give clues to who he was. The first of these ciphers were decoded only 2 days after publication by teachers Donald and Betty Harden. The rest were not able to be deciphered until December of 2020, where cipher Z-340 was cracked using modern technology. This, however, did not reveal anything of importance to the investigation. There were 5 official victims of the Zodiac Killer, but it was stated in the letters to be as high as 37. He was almost caught after killing a cab driver, where 3 teenagers were able to witness the incident. However, miscommunication or perhaps prejudice got in the way, and the cop that was assigned to check on the situation mistook the suspect as a black man, where in fact the Zodiac Killer was a white man, and that they even walked past each other as the Zodiac Killer was making his getaway. His murder supposedly continued and eventually stopped in 1974, where he taunted the media with one last letter. There were many names which were suspected of being the man behind the killings, such as Arthur Leigh Allen, Ross Sullivan, Lawrence Kay, and even the Manson family, but all were circumstantial evidence. I think that the man who solved the cipher, Donald Harden, had the biggest chance of being the Zodiac Killer. I think there was a lot of missed opportunities not interrogating the man. It was already difficult enough for the investigators to solve the ciphers, as each symbol was basically a blind guess as to the words and spacing of the content, coupled by the fact that there were 3 pieces to the first puzzle, and the orders weren't specified during publication. Solving it will be near impossible. I don't buy the blind luck factor which Donald and Betty were so affirmative about. The next of these ciphers puzzled investigators for more than 50 years until the next one was solved, suggests that there might be something fishy going on. We can tell from the killer's actions that he likes to taunt the police and media. What better way than to solve the cipher which he wrote himself, making headlines as a persona of a regular man, hiding his secret of being the real Zodiac. There's also evidence of Donald and Betty having resemblance to the Zodiac and finding the initials DH in one of his diagrams. It could have been the 2 working as one serial killer persona, but the truth won't be known as they have since passed away. There are still 2 more ciphers waiting to be cracked. Perhaps they will lead to the truth of the matter. The murder of the Grimes sisters. On December 28, 1956, the two sisters named Barbara and Patricia Grimes, aged 15 and 12, attended their beloved pop star Elvis Presley's film Love Me to Tender in a theater located in Chicago, Illinois. Even after seeing the movie a handful of times, they were quite excited as they were devout Elvis Presley fans. They promised their mother that they would be home before midnight, and it was stated by the friends of the girls that they stayed to watch a second viewing of the movie. Upon not seeing her daughter arrive at midnight, the mother told the daughter Teresa and son Joey to find them. A missing persons report was filed in the early mornings when the two were not found. This was one of the biggest missing persons case in Cook County, Chicago, as 200 officers were stationed to continue the search. Their bodies were eventually found a month later on January 21, 1957, discarded in a field. Autopsy reported showed no fatal wound, and the death of the two were caused by exposed to freezing temperatures. Witnesses stated that they entered a car with a man with a striking similar appearance to Elvis on the night of their disappearance. One man was under the investigation as he was reported to be seen with the girls at a diner. His name was Edward Bedwell, a 21-year-old dishwasher. He signed a confession stating that he met the girls on January 7th and with the accomplice named Frank, knocked the sisters unconscious after sexually assaulting the two and then dumping them on the field. This confession, however, conflicted with the autopsy report stating that the two had died the same day they disappeared. The autopsy report obviously contradicted with the other witnesses, as they were seen a week after their supposed death. This case is seemingly too convoluted to be solved, as the facts that are provided are too contradicting. There were other suspects, but due to the lack of evidence, they were all acquitted of their charges. The perpetrator has likely some kind of inside connection to the police department or the autopsy team, which they have succeeded in interfering with the investigation. This case, again, will likely never be solved. Dr. Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was the renowned activist for the American civil rights movement and the progression of the abolishment of segregation and racism. He was assassinated on April 4, 1968 by James Earl Ray in front of the diner Martin was eating at. James was captured 2 months later while trying to board a flight out of the country. People were quick to point out some inconsistencies in the case. The entire plan would be very difficult for one man to achieve, which would mean that there was multiple perpetrators. James, while running away, dropped his bedsheets, rifle, and other belongings in front of the Canib Amusement Company. No sane person would do such a thing, which gave evidence to the whole thing being planned in advance, shifting the blame on James. During the investigation, James did state that he was a small pawn in a bigger conspiracy designed by a man named Raoul, but no such man was ever found. Lloyd Jowler came into public's eye when he appeared on prime television to admit that he had conspired with the federal government and the mafia to kill Martin. He also stated that James was not the one who landed the killing blow, but rather someone else hiding in the bush. There was obviously a lack of evidence to all these statements, which at the end left us in the dark if there was any truth to the arrest of James Earl Ray. I personally believe that the evidence strongly suggests that James was set up to be a scapegoat. His belongings that were discarded showed that he was not a man to plan out things in advance. Judging from the lack of evidence, the truth will only be left as what we know now. O.J. Simpson. The trial of O.J. Simpson was titled The Trial of a Century for rightful reasons. The ex-wife of O.J., Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ronald Goldman were found stabbed to death in front of Ronald's condo in Los Angeles on June 12, 1994. O.J. Simpson, the main person of interest, was quickly apprehended. Nicole had just recently divorced with him, and obviously he wasn't happy about the whole thing. The trial of O.J. was nationally broadcasted, which proceeded with him organizing a legal team encompassing the best to offer to back him up. It was reported that the team had costed him $50,000 a day to maintain. The trial started from January 24, 1995 to October 3rd of the same year, with 150 million people tuning in for the final verdict. This would have been the most successful television show if it wasn't based on morbid reality. He was eventually judged as not guilty, but was taken back for a civil trial on February of 1997, where he was found liable and needed to pay $33.5 million in damage to the families involved. There had been many attempts of people trying to get O.J. to confess his crimes, but no one has been successful. O.J. was later admitted to prison for armed robbery and kidnapping in late 2008. There were conspiracy theories of a second person at the killing of Nicole Brown Simpson, but no one has since stood out or be identified, so the theory is difficult to believe. I would say that judging by OJ's irrational actions, for example, robbery and kidnapping, he was entirely capable of doing things out of the realms of legality. Accompanied at the height of his career, he would not be very happy with Nicole initiating the divorce, and he committed the murders out of hatred. Bob Crane. Bob Crane was a television star known to millions as the cast of Hogan's Heroes, a popular sitcom in the 1960s. On June 29, 1978, he was found dead in an apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona, after a co-worker noticed his absence for lunch. He was found with gashes in his head and an electrical cord tied around his neck. Upon investigation, Bob was found to have a particular interest, in that he loved documenting his sexual adventures with photography or film. Through this hobby, he met the salesman, John Henry Carpenter, who provided him with the latest video cameras. They would together act on Bob's fantasies, picking up women in clubs and videotaping together. Upon finding the tapes in Bob's possession, John was apprehended. John was in town at the time of Bob's death, and he was interrogated and searched. Blood splatters were found in his rental car that matched Bob's type, but due to DNA testing not being available at that time, it could not be concluded that the blood belonged to Bob, and so no charges were filed. The murder weapon was not found either, but it was suspected to be a camera tripod. The case was reopened in 1990, where technology advances were able to provide the case with new information. However, DNA testing of the blood splatter provided inconclusive, and the piece of brain tissue that was found later was lost during handling by the police department. Bob's son, Robert, stated that his father wanted to end the friendship with John due to him being clingy, which could have been a reason for John to kill Bob, out of anger for the broken relationship. The second trial, which took place in 1994, had John acquitted of his charges. Bob was also having issues with the second marriage at the time of his death, and it could be that his wife or a previous lover found out about his various activities and came to exact their revenge. It says that all the evidence have either been lost or can be no longer used, which is why this case is stopped in its tracks and will likely never get solved. The Tunguska Event. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, a massive explosion occurred near the Podokamenya Tunguska River, Siberia. The explosion was so large, it flattened over 830 square miles, or 2,150 square kilometers of land, leveling trees and man-made structures into a radial pattern. What puzzled the investigators was that there was no impact crater. This is where the mystery lies. No one is certain of what caused this event to happen. NASA provided a good explanation of a meteorite entering the atmosphere and detonating in midair due to its composition reacting with extreme heat, which is entirely possible. The kind of explosion was definitely not man-made, as it equated to 185 times the force of a nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima. This case seemed to be solved rather than a mystery for the end of time. Tupac. The renowned musician and rapper Tupac Shakur was killed in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996. He was there to celebrate his friend and business partner's birthday and watching the boxing match between Mike Tyson and Bruce Sheldon. At 11:15 p.m., while stopping at a red light, a white Cadillac pulled over to the passenger side of the vehicle Tupac was in and started firing. Tupac was shot 4 times, one being the fatal blow which punctured his lungs. He was put under life support but was unable to recover, as he died 6 days later due to internal injuries. During his rise to fame, he was in hot waters with rival rapper Notorious B.I.G., or also known as Biggie Smalls. After the release of his third album, Tupac was shot multiple times in the lobby of a recording studio, but he did survive with minor injuries. Biggie was suspected to be behind the shootings, but no concrete connections can be formed. These two started 2 sides to rapping, East rapping and West rapping, which the 2 sides were heavily in contention with. The 2 names released diss tracks on each other's music, when allegedly one got fed up and ordered a hit, resulting in Tupac's death. If it wasn't Biggie behind the whole fiasco, it could very well be another individual who wanted to take advantage of their rivalry and pin the blame on Biggie Smalls. The ones who committed the murder were never caught, which is why Tupac's death still remains a mystery. Notorious B.I.G. As stated above, the Notorious B.I.G. or Biggie Smalls was in rivalry with Tupac Shakur. After the successful hit and death of Tupac, Biggie was heavily accused of being behind the whole thing. On March 7, 1997, much like the death of Tupac, he was waiting behind a red light next to Peterson Automobile Museum in Los Angeles, California. A Chevy Impala pulled beside the car and opened fire with a pistol, striking Biggie 4 times. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead hours later. Obviously, it was predicted that the accomplices of Tupac killed him due to revenge, And I believe that to be the blatant truth of the matter. Although no perpetrator were captured, I think there is no denying that the cause of the death is of gang rivalry. It was unfortunate that things had to end this way for the two legendary rappers. Glitches in reality. I'm sure you've seen The Matrix, where it depicts reality as a simulation. Of course, simulations are without flaws, and sometimes you may be able to see things that are seemingly defy the rules of normal reality. These typically pertain to objects or people disappearing and appearing in thin air, physical impossibilities, such as people clipping through solid objects, two events existing simultaneously with different result, and so on. The idea that reality is not particularly real stems from far back as the Greek philosopher Plato, Buddhist monk, and even the Bible. Through the development of quantum physics, we begin to realize that something perceived by the mind is only understood by one point of view. It is only by seeing the world with our own sensory organs we are able to process everything. Today, that the theory of humans living in an actual computer simulation has gained popularity through influencers like Elon Musk. I think that this idea is intriguing, but ultimately lacks proof, just like any other theory. If we were to think, why would intelligent creatures create a simulations just to watch us screw it all up? Perhaps for entertainment, or perhaps we are too small in the grand scale of things, but it seems improbable and a waste of resources. Many of the glitches are simply incompetence of our perception and memory, as demonstrated by countless optical illusions. As humans, we are easily tricked, but our pride is what gets in our way, not admitting to such things, which eventually may be our biggest downfall. The Red Rooms. Alright, I think he spelled Red Rooms wrong here, but Red Rooms are an urban legend of livestream platform only accessible on the dark web. Once you enter this site, you are usually greeted with a camera pointing towards one individual who is the star of the show. The host of the livestream will usually take requests from viewers through payments using cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, thus untrackable. Once the payment is completed, the host will continue with whatever the request is. Not one single detail will be spared. This could mean degrading acts, mutilation, torture, and even murder. These individuals are usually the victims of human trafficking and missing people you see on flyers. The legitimacy of these websites are under question, as there are many people on Reddit and 4chan claiming to have visited these places but providing no evidence. However, a real incident did take place in Korea called the Inthrum case. Several people with anonymous profile created channels using Telegram to distribute sexual exploitative videos. Young women will be lured through job offerings and will be blackmailed after they had given out their personal information. Using this as leverage, the man called Doctor would force them to perform sexual acts that was requested by the members of the group. There are 103 confirmed victims of this incident, including 26 minors, and their videos were distributed to around 60,000 unique individuals. Eventually, the police force stepped in and the operation was ceased, leading to the arrest of the men involved. Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam is actually a schoolmate of mine who studied at the University of British Columbia. I never knew her since she was a few grades above me, but I remember this case quite well when the news of it dropped. In January of 2013, Elisa arrived in Los Angeles for a vacation. She traveled alone and booked a room in the infamous Cecil Hotel, a place known for unsolved cases, such as the murder of Black Dahlia and Goldie Osgood. Elisa at the time was suffering from bipolar and depression, which was a factor of the main contention on the strange action that were caught on CCTV. The famous elevator video had sparked many theories and questions as to what happened to her during the days before she was found dead in the water tanks of the hotel. The elevator door never closed while she was there, and that she was moving irrationally, leading people to believe that there were interventions with the hotel staff, and Elisa was under the effect of some kind of drugs. The body was discovered after people had been complaining of the taste of the water coming from the taps. She was bloated but showed no signs of physical harm. The rooftop was easily accessible through the fire escape, thus easily maneuvering past the camera's alarm, but she would have never known how to access it without inside information. And so, without any leads, her death would be known as a mystery. I believe that upon arriving at the hotel, she was already under surveillance. In those kinds of sketchy neighborhood, one can only imagine the type of characters that lurk beneath the shadows. Elisa was targeted because, truth be told, a single woman traveling to an unfamiliar location is as vulnerable as they can get, and she became the victim of someone's twisted desires. The Diatlov Pass incident. I have covered this case in full detail, so please check that out if you have the time. In January of 1959, a group of 10 university students and friends went hiking through the snowy lands of the northern Urals in Russia. They were very experienced, but when they did not send out a telegram to their peers and relatives, a search and rescue team was dispatched. Their campsite was eventually found on February 26, 1959, near Diatlov Pass. What puzzled investigators was how the campsite was left. The tent was cut open from the inside. Everything, including clothes and shoes, were left behind, as if the hikers left in a hurry. The footprints were found leading to the nearby forest, where 2 bodies were found, dead from hypothermia, and only in their underwear. They seemed to have made fire and climbed the tree, possibly to check out the surroundings. 3 more bodies were discovered within the snow in the direction from the forest to the camp, suggesting that they were trying to return to the camp after reaching the forest, but all 3 died from hypothermia. The last 4 bodies were found in a ravine a month later, after the snow had melted. They were dressed better, and 2 of them died to hypothermia, but the other 2 were quite different. One died from severe internal bleeding from a stress trauma, and the other from a fatal skull injury. Their death has been a mystery ever since, leading to the most craziest of theories. These theories include government experimentation, avalanche, howling winds creating hallucination, and even aliens. None were conclusive. I believe that the area was used for military testing of parachute bombs, as there were sightings of loud noises and large flashing lights by the natives that lived there. What essentially happened that night was that one parachute bomb that was used for testing exploded in the vicinity of their campsite. Upon hearing the explosion in the middle of the night, they thought that they were under attack. They ripped open the tent and ran towards the forest. A couple of them were injured when more bombs started to explode behind them. This explains the chest injury and the gash in the skull. They made camp near the woods, and when everything was cleared up, some people tried to go back to the tent and get their equipment, but died because of the low temperature. The rest suffered the same fate as well. But like I said, this is just a theory, and the case will likely never get solved. The Black Dahlia murder case. On the morning of January 15, 1947, the naked body of Elizabeth Short was found in a vacant parking lot in San Andreas. The shocking scene was even more publicized due to how she was killed. Her body was severed in 2 from the waist and drained of all blood. The position of Elizabeth was purposely posed by whoever dropped her, having her skin cleaned of all blood and the intestine tucked away so the scene would be neatly displayed. Her mouth has been slashed, much like the smile of a joker. She was given the name Black Dahlia after the case was broadcasted by the media, and instantly became a topic of the town. This created many fake police reports claiming to be the one responsible, but ultimately not leading to anything. The ones who had close relationship with Elizabeth were interviewed, but no direct leads were uncovered, leaving it as a cold case. This was until decades later, when recordings of George Holdow were uncovered where he states, "Suppose I did kill Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyways, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I killed my secretary." George was a physician who may have tended to Elizabeth's health conditions. The secretary, in quote, refers to Ruth Spalding, his own secretary who died of a supposed drug overdose in her apartment. She allegedly had evidence against George of his tax evasion and was planning to use it as blackmail. In 1999, George's son, Steve, began to publicize that his father was the one responsible for the killing of Black Dahlia and his secretary. The main lead in this case would be the recording and his profession as a physician, having medical background. Unfortunately, George has already died, and we cannot further confirm whether or not he was the one who killed the Black Dahlia, leaving this as a cold case. Thank you for watching the first layer of the Unsolved Crime and Mystery Iceberg. Tune in next time for the following episode of the second layer, where I will be covering more mysterious and unsolved cases.